Wonder why Shazam became an instant success in theaters? Well, the story of how this comic book hero came to be could surprise you as we dive right into the secrets behind the success of the Shazam comics and the reason they lost the court battle against Superman. So, here is the untold truth of Shazam. Let's dive right into it, shall we? From comic books to movies. We now know him as Shazam, and we can thank Zachary Levi for most of that, but his original name was Captain Marvel. At least, that's what the ultra-successful comic books called him. Shazam was only a catchphrase the superhero used that made him stand out from the crowd. And no, today we will not talk about the hidden story behind Shazam's superpowers. What we will be focusing on is the origin story of this character and how a small comic book company managed to take on a giant like DC Comics back in the 40s. Origin. It all started with National Comics, which later became known as DC Comics. They created ultra-popular characters like Superman and Batman, and the whole comic book culture was born. Wanting to get in on the action, Fawcett Publication hired writer Bill Parker and told him to create the storyline for several superheroes that could later be turned into a comic book. Parker came up with names like Spy Smasher, Golden Arrow, Scoop Smith, and many others, but none of them appealed to the publishers. Then, they heard about a team of 6 superheroes, and each of them received their powers from a Greek god. The publication's director at the time, Ralph Day, told Parker to put all of those 6 people into one. Now, it was only a matter of figuring out a name for this superhero. Names like Captain Thunder stuck for a while. And then they hired designer C.C. Beck to illustrate Parker's superhero story. They wanted to bring the hackneyed formulas of the pulp magazine to comic books and still manage to tell a story about a mythical superhero. And you know what? The comic book's first number was Whiz Comics number 2. If you're scratching your head in confusion, well, let us explain. You see, Fawcett Publications went with an ashcan copy for the first number. This is what publications did back in the 40s to test a comic book, see if the name is taken before establishing trademarks. And guess what happened? The names Flash Comics, Thrill Comics, and even Captain Thunder were all trademarked. So now, the publication became Whiz Comics, and the superhero's name got shortened from Captain Marvelous to Captain Marvel. All it took was a change in name in the word balloons of issue number 1. Major success. Before we talk about the success of the comics, don't forget to smash that like button. It keeps the almighty YouTube algorithm happy, and you keep getting these videos for free. Whiz Comics number 2, Captain Marvel, hit the bookshelves late in 1939. The comic book talked about a 12-year-old boy who was orphaned and became a superhero after talking to an ancient wizard called Shazam. Captain Marvel even got his first major nemesis, Dr. Sivana. Now, there was something special about a story including a little average kid becoming a superhero that resonated with the youngsters of the generation. They felt like they could become a superhero themselves, and they started buying the comics like crazy. But as we've already said, this was the time when National Comics started publishing Batman and Superman, but none of them could match the success of Shazam. Why? Because Captain Marvel included a boy that could become a superhero just by saying the words Shazam. In fact, during one staff meeting, Roscoe Kent Fawcett told his people, quote, "Give me a Superman, only have his other identity be a 10 or 12-year-old boy rather than a man." At the height of their fame, the publication was pulling $1.1 million per month. Yeah, that many people were interested in Captain Marvel. Wanting to capitalize on the notion, Fawcett Publishing put Captain Marvel in WOW Comics, Master Comics, Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, the Marvel Family, and there was even a Hoppy the Marvel Bunny character that appeared in its own comic book and was releasing 2 headlines every month. Now compare that with Superman and Batman, who each had 3, and one of the included World's Finest Comics, where they appeared together. This was the golden age of comic books, and no one really knew what fans wanted. It was a new genre of art, so comics had to figure out everything as they went along. Regardless, the people who created Superman were pissed that someone else was stealing their readers. So, what did they do? Superman files a lawsuit. DC Comics decided they had enough of Captain Marvel stealing their audience. After all, they made a character that was just like Superman. Instead of the giant S on his chest, they slapped a lightning bolt on his chest, changed the story a little bit, and voila! They made a new comic book. Not to mention, the Whiz Comics #2 was actually an exact copy of the first edition of DC's Superman. If Superman was lifting a car on the cover of the first issue, Captain Marvel was throwing a car in Whiz's comic book cover. After a long legal battle that went on for 7 years, from 1941 until 1948, National Comics Publications Incorporated went to court against Fawcett Publications Incorporated that same year. Still, the judge couldn't make a decision, as National Comics hadn't copyrighted most of the Superman issues. Needless to say, the initial verdict favored Fawcett Publications in 1951. The next year, Judge Learned Hand decided that NC's Superman had a valid copyright claim, and therefore, it was decided that Fawcett Publications Incorporated will stop producing Captain Marvel for good, and all of the rights to the name would go to DC. But how did the world react to such a harsh decision? The new versions of Captain Marvel. With the supply of Captain Marvel comics abruptly cut off, people didn't like the idea that they would never see the superhero appear in the comics. So that's why different publications across the world published comics with similar storylines. One such example was Marvel Man, created by Mick Anglo from the UK. Then, Marvel Man got changed, and it now became Miracle Man, and was written by Alan Moore. Finally, there was the comic book by MF Enterprises that made their own version of Captain Marvel, but they turned him into an android that could divide his body into several parts just by saying split, and then reassemble himself by saying Zam. While all of this was going on, DC was creating their own Captain Marvel. Theirs was released back in 1967, who was a space soldier who wanted to conquer Earth, but then had a change of heart and became a hero instead. Just another desperate attempt to bring back a fan-favorite superhero from the past. Silver Age. Golden opportunity! During the 60s, comic books were becoming popular once again. This was known as the Silver Age of comic books. Not wanting to leave Captain Marvel to rot, then DC publisher Carmine Infantino convinced Fawcett Publications to license the Captain Marvel and Marvel family to DC, so they could start producing the popular hero once again. The name Infantino wanted to go with for the comics was the original Captain Marvel, but Marvel Comics was rising in popularity, and they had their own Captain Marvel, so they gave them a big no. That's why in December of 1974, DC's new comic book line became The World's Mightiest Mortal, which began with Shazam number 15. Captain Marvel was finally brought back, but now he was known as Shazam. The storyline was the same, the superhero was the same, and the successful line continued once more. DC saw the same popularity as Fawcett Publications did back in the day, so they decided to make Shazam a full member of the DC universe. Shazam was now fighting side by side with Superman, Batman, The Flash, and others. And as we all know, in 2019, Shazam, aka Captain Marvel, got its own movie, which earned a jaw-dropping $366 million at the box office on a measly $62.5 million budget. And the saga continues. On a related note, do you think that Shazam has a better storyline than Superman or not? You can tell us in the comments section below. If you'd like more videos like these, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss any of them. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.